Let's talk about employee loyalty. I've been asked several times lately about how to improve employee loyalty and why it seems to have kind of gone away over the last several years. First, let me explain what the issue is and why it matters. You see, when employees are not loyal to the company they're working for, their overall engagement and productivity goes down because they don't see their job as a long-term commitment, but rather a kind of a short-term stepping stone. Meaning they'll be there for a while, collect their paycheck, but move on when a better opportunity comes up. This also leads to turnover, which can be incredibly costly for any company, no matter the size. The latest numbers I saw actually indicate that the average cost of hiring is $14,000 to hire a new employee. So this obviously goes to show that if a company can improve employee loyalty, it can save them money and increase productivity and employee engagement. But beyond that, it also builds a healthier kind of team culture where employees are working for the benefit of the entire organization and not just for their own personal well-being. So let's look at what caused this shift in the workforce, where just a couple of generations ago, it was incredibly common for a person to spend their entire career with one company and then retire. In fact, I have a family member that spent over 40 years. I believe it was 45 is what he finally retired with. 45 years with the same company whenever he retired. And that wasn't uncommon, especially with the generation just before me. But the latest research is showing that a person now changes jobs an average of 12 times. That means if someone works from the age of 20 years old and retires at 65, they will spend less than 4 years average at each job. In fact, I often tell my clients that if they can get 3 years out of an employee in today's market, they should consider that a success. It's a sad shift, but it's unfortunately the reality that we operate in. So what caused this problem? I believe there are several factors, but with as hard as it may be to hear this, I believe it started with the employer, not the employee. Ultimately, I believe we have conditioned our workforce to understand and believe that employers are no longer loyal to employees. So how can we expect the employee to be loyal to the employer? Let's look at a couple of these reasons. One is companies rarely invest in their employees. I remember my dad, most of his career, he spent in public education, and he would often talk to my brothers and I about finding a stable job with a stable company and sticking with it. And he could never understand why any of us would be willing to kind of go to another company or look for a job when we had a kind of quote stable job where we were. However, I distinctly remember him talking about this a lot when I was with a large corporation, and we had a running joke that the company would fire us at any time for any reason if they wanted to. And at that time, I didn't really think of it as company loyalty or as a company loyalty issue, but that's exactly what it was. We would frequently see people get terminated for kind of technicalities when the real issue might be that their boss didn't like them, or the company just needed to remove a position from the org chart. But they would get terminated on these sort of technicalities instead of fixing the issue. They would want to avoid the issue, and instead of trying to address it, they'd try to ignore it. And so the company would rather kind of eliminate the problem rather than take the time to correct the problem. And I'm talking about simple things like maybe they looked up hotel rates on Google, and so they'd get them on an internet policy. Not saying that it's not against the policy, but let's be honest and let's be real. If we have a decent employee, are we really going to terminate them because they spent 5 minutes looking up hotel rates for an upcoming trip? Absolutely not. But we were in a company, in a culture environment where we knew that was kind of the norm. And so this left little motivation for the employees to give the company 100% for the company's sake, because we knew the company did not have our back. And so the only reason most of us would really give 100% was for personal gain, which would either include internal promotions or building the resume for external opportunities. The other thing that we've seen is that we've recognized that companies are treating employees like a commodity. They've conditioned employees to understand they are just there for the company's benefit to be used, and then they move on. we've seen way too often over the past 20 years, and in fact, even more so over the past 10 to 12 years since the 2008 downturn. Companies that are laying people off just a few years or even just months before their retirement. We see companies moving overseas. They're forcing employees to relocate across the country. They're doing massive layoffs during holidays. And as people see this, companies are conditioning employees to believe that the company's not concerned with their well-being or the personal impact to the employee. So what do you think happens to the 25-year-old son or daughter of an employee who's been with the same company for 35 years and then gets laid off? They certainly are not going into the workforce with the mentality that if I take care of my employer, they will take care of me. The other thing that I've seen as sort of a real shift in what's creating some of this mindset is employers rarely show that they're truly concerned for the well-being of the individual person. How often have you heard stories of someone getting injured or being sick and the company saying, no, we still need you here. You got to get to work. I actually heard a story recently of a gentleman that was recruited to a new company. He was recruited. He was asked to come to the company, not by my recruiting company, I'd like to add, but he was recruited to this company, started the new job, informed them very early on that he and his wife were expecting their first baby in just a few months. The employer informed him that the timing wasn't great because a couple of other people already had vacation planned around that time, and that was kind of a busy time with people taking off for vacations. So they actually asked him to have his wife schedule a C-section a couple weeks earlier if he wanted to have a few days off with his new baby. This is a true story of a Fortune 100 company. Now, what I want us to understand in some of this is these are individual people that are making these decisions, but this is a representation of the overall company. I could go on and on with examples, but ultimately what I want us to recognize and realize is that we may not be able to make a global impact as individual employers, but if the employer loyalty is down, employee loyalty will also be down. And so although we can't make a global impact, we can make an impact within our own company to increase employee loyalty by first increasing employer loyalty. We just can't get discouraged when people still leave because we are fighting against a current which has conditioned our workforce to believe that the employer does not care about them. So we have to prove employees wrong. And so whenever we've conditioned and they're seeing this in the media and they're feeling this, they're sensing this, they've seen it in their own family, then it's hard for them to understand why they should care about their employer. And we can certainly blame things like our younger workforce not having an attention span or wanting to conquer the world without putting in the work. And I'm not saying this doesn't play a little bit of a role. However, stop thinking about the kind of the propaganda that you hear and instead think about your individual employees. If you take care of them, if you invest in them, if you care about their well-being and their future, you're going to show that you are loyal to them. And more times than not, they will reciprocate that feeling.